The front pages, let's run through those. This is the way they're shaping up today. The Prime Minister saying in the Telegraph that the West made a terrible mistake with Putin over Crimea. And the Times discusses the rush to take in Ukrainian refugees with the government's website crashing due to demand.
Also picturing, as you can see there, Roman Abramovich in an airport. The Mirror leading on the three Britons killed in a Russian missile strike. And the Sun is leading on how the nation is rallying against Putin.
OK, going through the papers now, Mary Dejevsky, who is a columnist at The Independent, Andre Walker, commentator, and you'll know him from GBNews as well. And I really want Andre to talk about this. Abramovich, Isabel pointed him out in the front page of the Times here. So, what's the new take on him?
Well, I mean, the reality is that they are continually now publishing evidence of so-called Abramovich wrongdoing. Now, what I find totally bizarre about this, Eamon, is that if this man was so toxic, and I have no reason to disbelieve the intelligence briefings, why was he allowed to make off like a bandit in London for all these years?
Mate, I so agree with you, and as a football supporter, and I know football supporters are blind. Chelsea fans really don't seem to care who runs their club, neither Newcastle fans or, I'd say, any fans. I say they're the same. Winning is everything. But this man, why are they facilitating him to take his loot? They're letting him sell his club by the end of the week for whatever price, and as long as he gets the money out of it, he can make off with that. But this headline, this story that you've pointed out, says that he was part of a £2 billion organised crime scam.
That's right. Now, here is the critical thing, and we all have to admit it to ourselves. There was a policy in this country, rightly or wrongly, to take loot from across the world. Now, whether that be dodgy dictators, whether it be Russian oligarchs. Now, the City of London became comparatively rich as a result. But the reality is this country has to face up to the fact that we have willfully brought fraudsters, we have willfully brought dodgy loot, we have willfully brought ill-gotten gains to London for the power of the City of London. Now, look, I'm a freeman of the City of London. I'm incredibly proud to have been involved in the City of London over the years, but it has to be said that there are people who are victims of crime, victims of genocide, victims of governmental theft, and the proceeds are ending up in London. And I think this raises a wider issue. By the way, on the issue of Chelsea, I genuinely think that Chelsea fans, no matter how supportive they are of Abramovich, I think they ought to have been warned and something ought to have been done. Because the idea that Chelsea's in this position now, I just think is really pathetic.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, it'd be awful to see a club having to fold because of politics, really, at the end of the day. They knew him. He should have been wound down a long time ago, and as you say, the government took the money. They were happy to.
But at the end of the day, look, you know, I am not in a position to vet somebody who runs a football club.
You can't just say that your name is Russian, therefore I'm suspicious of you.
That's right. But one would expect that if the man has been allowed into the United Kingdom, allowed to buy Chelsea Football Club, that there wasn't a whole range of evidence of wrongdoing against him.
And I just want to say, I think this is a subject of a panorama report on BBC One, which I think is tonight. Tonight on that.
Let's bring in Mary Dejevsky now. You've chosen this story on the front of the Metro. They've had a bit of fun with their headline saying, "You're putting us up, mate." And this is the invasion of so-called liberators of an oligarch's Belgravia mansion.
Yes, this is sort of poetic justice, isn't it? A whole load of squatters moved into Oligarch Deripaska's mansion. And there's some wonderful accounts of what they found when they got there. So many rooms that they said they got lost and they couldn't find their way around it. Lots of original paintings on the walls, and comments like, no one person should really be allowed to own this amount, all of which is entirely true. But I think it was also pointed out when the squatters moved in, and by the way, I think they've been evicted and arrested now, that there was something like 10
I wonder would they've been evicted and
vans.
arrested if they'd moved into your house?
Well, that's the point that I was about to make, because they said that there were more than 10 police vans outside before they even moved in to arrest anybody, and saying, how difficult is it to get a single policeman to come around if you've had your burglary?
I'll tell you, I love the story. So a lot of people in London live in properties that they think of as their own, but actually they're on long leaseholds. That includes Roman Abramovich's £150 million mansion, which he has to pay a ground rent to the Queen of 10 grand a year. Well, he is unable to pay it. The Queen must be leaping for joy because she will be able to repossess the place if he doesn't pay. Can you imagine? He's failed to pay 20 grand and she's repossessed £150 million.
Not too shabby.
That's not
good return.
Yeah.
To be fair, Eamon, she's doing all right anyway.
She's doing all right. But it is an interesting trend, this kind of invasion of oligarch homes. And I think somewhere in Biarritz, where Putin's daughter's house had the same thing happen yesterday, his youngest daughter.
And there's also a move which is rather wonderful too, to say that these homes, which they're empty. I mean, they're basically investment properties. Nobody's living there. They're there as sort of banking investments. The idea being that they should actually move Ukrainian refugees into them, which of course is a brilliant idea. Whether this will actually happen.
Well, Supreme irony, isn't it?
We talked about Sutton Place yesterday in Surrey, which is all the staff have been sent home, and you know how many refugees you could house there. I don't know how many bedrooms it is, but
I saw a mansion by a Russian oligarch on the TV. They wouldn't say who it was, but every year they spend £150,000 putting up Christmas decorations. He's never slept in it.
Never been there.
And the other thing is, you know, putting up Ukrainians in these places, I mean, it is money stolen from the Ukrainian taxpayer, the Russian taxpayer, the Armenian taxpayer in a lot of these cases. You know, these people are not exactly whiter than white, as we've now discovered.
Yeah. Andre, you want to talk about, this is the front page of the Express, and we're talking about former special forces from Britain volunteering for this conflict, or maybe they're paid mercenaries, but it hasn't ended well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I said in the earlier press, in the earlier paper review, that this was 5 miles from where I was based. You know, there are a lot of people piling over, doing various things. I mean, my understanding about this base, though it appears to be a bit shadowy, that it was a distribution centre for equipment and also the base of the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. To what extent that's a real thing and to what extent it's a PR stunt, I don't know. But obviously, quote-unquote, ex-British Special Forces are there training local Ukrainians, and it's been hit. The critical thing about this, by the way, and this is part of the thing that I'm doing, Putin is going wild about the amount of aid, equipment and weapons coming in. It was a deliberate warning to the Poles. But, of course, all we did was sat on the other side of the border taking these lorries to bits, so he can see it from the sky. I think the concern is that he's potentially loony enough to whack our bases in Poland.
You do?
I think potentially,
When you say our bases, you mean where all these utilities are, where the aid is going to, and with the aid, I mean, we could be talking about generators, which the government promised yesterday, 500.
Yeah, just to explain, because for people who didn't watch the earlier paper review, what I've been doing is going out there, but what we do is we take aid trucks, we set up distribution centres, put them into smaller vehicles to go over the Ukrainian border, but we shut our distribution centres 12 hours after we open them, just in case there's an airstrike.
Good, very good thinking.
Mary, we were talking about housing refugees in oligarchs' mansions, but let's talk about the government website that launched yesterday, crashed for a couple of hours because it was absolutely deluged with British people trying to open up the doors to their private homes. Really heartwarming story.
Yes, I mean, it does tell a story of enormous generosity and sort of instinctive desire to help all these people lots of them have been walking across the border into Poland, and Poland says they've got so many people they can't cope. I think the big question is whether you're actually going to have many, many more people volunteering to accommodate refugees in the UK than there are actually going to be refugees wanting to come.
Good position to be in.
Well, yes, it's a very good position to be in, but it does mean that, that most of the refugees here are women and children and older people. And so the idea that they're going to be eventually sort of self-sufficient and they're apparently going to be allowed to work, but a lot of them won't be in the position to work. So it's going to be, I think, a lot more complicated than people maybe think.
I think people who end up in the United Kingdom will principally be disappointed by that because they want to be in the countries near Ukraine, but ultimately there is a limit to how much Poland, Moldova, Romania can take.
Yeah.
How much can Kiev take, Andre? This is from the Guardian front page.
Well, I mean, look, it is being pounded, and it is an absolute nightmare. And the concern that I have, and I think that most people would have, is we saw what Putin did to Grozny in Chechnya. We saw what he did to Syria. There's been an assumption, and I think it is an assumption, that Vladimir Putin is racist enough to do it to the Chechens and the Syrians, but maybe not to Slavic people. We don't know whether that's true. Certainly, the barrel bombs have arrived, haven't they? But I mean, look, you know, we talk about people who are refugees. You've got to remember the majority of people are still in Ukraine, and so they suffer incredibly badly with this. And look, I just think that the Prime Minister was right. We have let this cheap schoolyard bully away with it for too long. The man's allegedly worth £200 billion. He's just a thief, he's a crook, he's a genocidal maniac. And when we allowed him to take Crimea, it's a critical mistake. I just feel it's like Hitler. You know, the more you let him get away with, the worse it gets.
How do we stop him then?
Well, I think we are stopping him, to be fair. You know, let's just be clear, and I know everyone goes sanctions, but, you know, he thought that we would not freeze the assets of the Russian central bank. 300 billion. The Nord Stream pipeline cancelled. Similarly, I mean, you know, he is furious at the amount of equipment that's coming in to Ukraine. Mm. You know, I mean, frontline forces have told me in Ukraine that don't send us any more gear because we've got that much. I mean, the Ukrainians javelin missiled the Russian parachute regiment. They all died day one. You know, this is a catastrophe for the Russian army. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to level Kiev, but it is still a catastrophe.
But China's becoming more and more crucial in all of this, isn't it? And this US intelligence was suggesting that Russia had asked Ukraine for military assistance. The Chinese embassy this morning has come out and said that was malicious disinformation. In the last few moments, the UK Foreign Minister, James Cleverly, has been speaking, saying that he's called upon the Chinese to cease support they may have of Russia. Yeah. And at the end of the day, as you say, this might be the end of Putin, but China has a key role in this. Yeah,
I don't think it's fair to describe it as, and I know you didn't, the Chinese did, to kind of describe it as fake news, because look, Vladimir Putin has asked the Chinese for support. The reason it's been exposed by the Americans is to encourage the Chinese to say no, which that appears to have happened. But I mean, look, you're seeing an increasing level of desperation. The Chinese, I don't think, will particularly get involved. But my concern is, can I use this word, the real wrong-uns are being sent into Ukraine. I mean, you know, the Chechen irregulars. These are people whose vetting status has rendered them ineligible to join the Chechen army. They're animals. And Assad's forces going in as well. They're the nasty squad.
Mary, I just want to finish on this front page of the Telegraph where the Prime Minister says the West made a terrible mistake after Crimea. In not dealing with Putin. It's like stating the bleeding obvious, really. It's like this report out today from Icelandic University saying people who have had COVID are likely to suffer
long-term COVID. No.
You know, it's the obvious. Of course,
you were going to say something about Sherlock.
I was going to say something about Sherlock, but I hate thinking. You know, I just say this to Boris Johnson. He wants to appear Churchillian. He wants to appear war leader. He's doing very, very well. Would he have done anything differently if he had been in power all those years ago?
Well, no, because actually in 2014, what people forget, they're saying, well, there was no response. There actually was a huge response, and Russia was a pariah for 3-4 years, and people forget that. But also because there was an issue with Crimea that by far the majority of the population in Crimea is Russian and Russian-speaking. Yes. It's a military territory.
So do you think if any deal is to be done in this present conflict, that Crimea will be an easy option to give to Russia?
Well, of course, in terms of Ukrainian national pride, no, because they want to Ukraine within its previous borders. And it looks as though they're not going to get that. So, yes, Crimea is an easy... Because everybody recognises that Crimea is actually not going to go back to Ukraine. But Ukraine will have to present it as a gigantic concession.
Okay.
Because it's a matter of national...
But if you look at the United Kingdom, we've given referenda in Scotland for people to secede from the United Kingdom. I think you've got to accept that if there's a democratic vote for people to leave the country, they can leave the country.